May I please, good morning, first of all. Good morning. I hope you're having a good time. Hello. May I please request my panelists to come up on and join me here? Mr. Robert Ford Nakusi from the ICT Chamber, Ms. Ashish Garg from TCIL, Mr. Nagabhushan from CDOT, Dr. Kumar from Tejas Networks, and I'm looking for Mr. Amit Yadav from the Government of India, but I guess he might be busy in a bilateral. Alice, is somebody going to change these plates? They go on television like this. Is JKK around to change the plates? Who's going to change these nameplates? We can remove them, but we can't let them go on like this. I don't want people to think I'm Noella. While all this is going on, let me set the stage for this discussion here. As you well understand that, the India-Africa Summit, as you see here, accelerating Africa's digital transformation and innovation agenda. What happened? What is? That's okay, I can talk while they do this. India and Africa have had a long-standing partnership which is traditional, cultural, people-to-people, trade, relationship, the fact that Indians live in people of Indian origin live in most countries of Africa, and some of them for almost 200 years. But in the modern context, as we look at the world evolving today, we want to take a step beyond the past and look at the present and into the future as to what India and Africa have in store together. How can we partner? How can we collaborate? And where do we collaborate? And what are the priorities of India and Africa today? It was not too long ago, I would say about 25, 30 years ago, India stood at the same place and phase where Africa is today. India has leapfrogged in technology, which is pretty much homegrown, and innovation, which has helped India become one of the top economies in the world today. And I think India is pretty much there where it will move from $2.4 trillion economy to a $5 trillion economy in the next 5 years. So there are good practices, there are good lessons, there are good learnings that we have from the last 15, 20 years that has helped the India growth curve. And I think it's time, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made this commitment that India's technology and innovation and what has helped India grow into a huge economy despite the challenges of 1.3 billion people, a lot of poverty still in the country, we have come to a point where we are able to meet those challenges with homegrown solutions, and we want to share them with Africa for the shared prosperity in Africa. So that is the underlying vision with which this conference was created, this expo was created, and we were delighted that His Excellency President Paul Kagame shares the same vision, has created Smart Africa, and Smart Africa in itself has 26 very pioneering smart member countries that want to follow a path to quick growth and development. So I wanted to make my panel aware that we are looking at the overall situation of what, how, and where India can trigger and play a role in transforming Africa, helping them, partnering with them, and what is it that we can find out and assess sitting together with the African nations that their priorities are, a needs assessment, and actually tackle that need with our solutions. So that I want to set the stage that that's what we want to discuss. All of you have had technical sessions, we've had technology being explained, we've had people ask the right questions about, what does India have to offer, you are in which part of ICT and IT. But let's take a sort of broader discussion here today. And I think it's very important for me also to say that I've attended pretty much every conference here, at least this year. And and my takeaway from Africa CEO Forum or Transform Africa that took place here for the 5th time a few months ago is that the World Bank, that means all the stakeholders, the big players, Africa as a whole, Smart Africa, the World Bank, which has just come out with the Digital Moonshot Report, and the leaders are very clear that they emphasize ICT and IT as the underlying priority need to move across sectors in growth and development. Because if we don't have that connectivity, we don't have that capacity, I don't know how quickly and whether across all sectors and going down to the last mile can we bring in that move up in the GDP. So that's the beginning. Now I'll take my seat. Good morning again. And let me tell you that these are some of the best professionals, some of the best people that we have here who've actually worked in their area of expertise and have a lot to contribute in terms of this discussion. But before I start, so that people know where you come from and what you do, very brief 60 seconds, starting with you, Robert, on what you've done in the context of what we are going to discuss today.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep. Thank you. My name is Robert Ford. I'm the Vice Chair of AFRINIC, which is the Internet Registry for Africa, the Regional Internet Registry for Africa. So we're responsible for allocation of Internet resources and anonymous numbers, specifically IP address, IPv4 and IPv6. But I'm also the regional coordinator for the Northern Corridor Technology Alliance and special advisor of the ICT Chamber on global partnerships.
Thank you. Mr. Nagabhushan.
Thank you. My name is Nagabhushanam. I came from CDOT, India. So CDOT is a technology development company, telecom technology development company by Government of India. And it will develop technologies on different 5 verticals like optical communications, wireless communications, and switching and software applications and security solutions. Actually, CDOT is actually made a revolution in telecom from 80s. In 80s, actually, for connecting remote rural areas with rural automatic telephone exchanges. Actually, more than 15 million lines are working in India. And we are actually last 35 years, we are working on emerging technologies like very high bandwidth, the DWDM, suitable for these 5G mobile networks, front haul and back haul. And Wi-Fi solutions, we have very innovative Wi-Fi solutions. And we have more than 34 technologies for ready for Rwanda. Actually, we are very happy to work with Rwanda government actually.
Thank you. Ashish, please.
Good morning. I'm Ashish Garg and I head corporate communications for TCIL. TCIL is Telecommunications Consultants India Limited. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of the Government of India, the Ministry of Telecommunications. And we were set up in 1978. And we work in about 65 to 70 countries across the world. One of our most iconic projects has been with Africa. It's called the Pan-Africa Network, e-Network project. And we just completed the first phase of the project, which was in 48 countries in Africa, started in 2006 and continued till 2017. And we are now implementing the second phase of that, which started last year. It's a Government of India project, and almost about $100 million have been invested by the Government of India on this project. And this is a project that actually focuses on telemedicine and teleeducation, where we bring in super specialty hospitals to connect with the super specialty hospitals here in different countries of Africa, and likewise for universities and institutions of higher education. But I'll talk more about that as the session moves ahead.
Thank you, Ashish. Dr. Kumar, please.
I am Kumar Shivarajan. I am Chief Technology Officer of Tejas Networks, which is a private company in India. We make telecommunication equipment, which is optical transmission, GPON, and LTE. Our proudest achievement has been BharatNet, where we were the prime supplier and implementer for this network, which connects 100,000 villages with GPON. I was also instrumental in founding India's standards body for 5G, the Telecom Standards Development Society of India, which is an organizational partner today of 3GPP, and we are sort of leading the developing country needs for 5G in both 3GPP and ITU. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We are short of time because we need to move to the closing session at 11:30. So I'm going to speed up the discussion a little bit and focus on the subject. We are in Africa at this summit, India-Africa. Robert, based on your experience, and I know you have a wide, vast variety, experience on cross-border collaborations, and you've been working very closely with Japan on the Japan-Africa corridor. And you know that Japan and India have also decided to collaborate and open up a completely new corridor on Japan-India-Africa Connect, particularly in technology and ICT. What are the ingredients that you see based on your experience? You've done the Northeast Corridor here. You've created PPPs within Africa. What would you recommend, and what is the need of the hour, and how do you think we should go about it to create the connect between India and Africa?
Thank you. Thank you for your very kind words, first of all. There are two major things that I have seen in my career trying to mobilize investments, offshore investments into Africa. And I've seen two major things that have constrained the volumes that would otherwise have come to Africa, but because of those two impediments, Africa has not benefited in getting the kind of investments that should be coming to Africa. One is the cost of investment. When a Japanese, for example, where I have been operating for the past 5 years, there is a lot of investment capital available in Japan to invest in Africa. A lot of it. They have a huge dormant pension fund that sits in banks but needs to go out. They have a senile demography, so they don't have the ingenuity that the country needs to be innovative. So a huge percentage of Japanese are working or are already in retirement. So those make it very easy for their capital to land in Africa. But the cost of investing is very high. When a Japanese wants to come here to invest, he buys a plane ticket and flies all the way to Africa for either a conference like this one or comes to partner with organizations like the ICT Chamber or other technology organizations to be able to find entry avenues for him to land his venture capital. That's a huge impediment. But what we've been trying to do to mitigate that is that we have, working with other stakeholders, put in place systems that make it easy for any investor, not just Japanese, but any investor, to seamlessly make investment without incurring so much cost. Currently, we're running what we call the Japan-Africa Technology Investment Bureau, which is a platform that sits on blockchain, and I'm very happy that a previous speaker on the previous panel was talking about how safeguarding security is going to be done well using blockchain. That system sits on blockchain. And what happens is that we collect a number of investables. We're working with a company that is specialized in training investables. They conduct boot camps, and it's called Biz 55. And what we do is that on this platform, someone sits in Japan or anywhere in the world, accesses our platform, pays some minimal fee to access a platform, and he looks at the amount of investables that there are in Africa. He chooses a product that he wants. Once he chooses that product, he comes back to us. We give him an API to a blockchain, and he is able to look at the operation of this investable for a period that he wants, probably six to 7 weeks, looks at the operations, and based on that, he is able to determine the rounds of investments he can make into that investable. In other words, what the platform is doing is actually conducting due diligence for him. And he can also be able to, since it sits on blockchain, he can pay in any form of payment. He can even use his cryptocurrency to pay. This makes it easy. It brings down the cost of investing in Africa. Now, there is already specifically the Japan-India corridor. They have already created a network, a platform through which they can collaborate in making investments in Africa. Such a system, such platform, and many other platforms similar to that will cut down the cost that an investor would actually incur when he's trying to make investment in Africa.
Let me ask you specifically, just like you created this platform for the Japanese investment into Africa, and you know that India is very eager, both the public sector and the private sector, and you have them represented here. Is there any thought, or could we bring in that thought? The PS is here, madam. Could we bring in a similar platform to induce Indian investors to follow a similar track? Because this seems like a great track, you know, the Japan-Africa corridor. So would you create something like that? Because I know that the Japan-India corridor right now is more on human capital, you know, creation, human capacity building, in particularly the ICT and IT sector. And a quick answer on that before I move to the private sector there.
Thank you. I talked about two impediments, and I think the second one answers that. The second one is how can we partner with governments, specifically governments, in making sure that the investments which come to Africa or which intend to come to Africa find it feasible to come to Africa. It's very difficult to tell an Indian that operates in a market of 1.2 billion people to come to invest in Rwanda, specifically Rwanda, where you have the per capita budget spent, the budget spent from a family or from a household on digital consumption is this small. If you look at how much money goes into an average household of a home in Rwanda, right, and look at what percentage of that amount of money is spent on technology, and look at how many families are able to spend even that small, it becomes difficult to convince an Indian to come and invest here. He's operating in a market of 1.2 billion people. But what needs to be done is partnerships between governments of Africa in trying to create interoperability between nations, between countries, so that, for example, telecom providers are able to have interoperability between them so that the market becomes bigger, which is what, for example, the Northern Corridor was trying to do, to make sure that you, for example, remove all the roaming charges between countries within one block. That makes it easier for a Rwandan to go to Tanzania or to go to Kenya or to go to Uganda and be able to use his phone. He doesn't have to change. So the market becomes bigger. It becomes bigger. Mobile money, for example, right, before you jump. Mobile money, for example. If we were to open interoperability between mobile money, between nations here, the volumes of money, transactions happening within a population of 300 million people is so high. That attracts someone to come and invest in Africa.
Robert, 30 seconds before I really go to my next panelist. Yesterday we signed an MOU between TEPC and Smart Africa. And Smart Africa as a platform is talking about that interoperability. So is that a good move? Is that a move in the right direction? Is Smart Africa moving in the right direction and the Indians should be encouraged to use that platform?
That's a very good move. I was responding to a tweet of a friend of mine called Patience. She heads Trademark East Africa. And she was talking about regional integration. And I think her opinion about regional integration was the traditional ways of heads of state sitting together and agreeing on regional integration. But I told her, I said, before you even sit on that table, technology is going to integrate you before you can even think about integration. Because e-commerce, for example, if I growth from West Africa, that's already integration.
Yeah.
If I'm able to do to communicate to someone beyond the borders, that's already integration. Integration in its form is, are people able to communicate and interact with each other? So yes, the answer
The
is
answer
yes.
is yes.
Smart Africa is a super answer.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go quickly because you touched upon the private-public partnership. I'll move to Dr. Kumar. Dr. Kumar, Tejas Networks is in 70+ countries, is India's biggest private sector player in manufacturing equipment. What has been your experience in the PPPs? And from what Robert has said, where would you pick up from what Robert has said and take it to where we want to sit here on the agenda of India-Africa?
Thank you, Manish. So if you look at India's journey for digital transformation, I think the first phase has been digital government. Okay, so the next phase will be digital citizen, but the first phase is digital government. And India has taken, I would say, surprisingly, a methodical, systematic approach to digitizing the government. It started with Aadhaar, a universal identification for all citizens, and the project was headed by the CEO of India's top private company, Nandan Nilekani from Infosys. So that was already a beautiful example of, private company, top management working to develop universal ID for all of India. Of course, following that was, all the banking transactions, everything got digitized. In some sense, Africa is probably ahead of that in mobile money, but we got our own universal payments gateway and all of that, and digitized essentially all government benefits, right? And underlying was this universal ID. But in order for the government to reach the citizens, even at their government offices, they needed a communication network, and a network that reached every village office, what we call a Gram Panchayat, and there are 200,000 or more than 200,000 of them in India. And for building this network, the government with the, again used a public-private partnership approach where the fiber was from 3 public sector companies, BSNL, Railtel, Power Grid, but the equipment was from the private sector. And they did a bold thing. They said, India has enough equipment, let's use Indian-made equipment for building this pan-India network connecting all its villages. They chose GPON as the technology. So we are happy to be one of the 3 players in building that network. That again is an example of a public-private partnership where the entire digital communication backbone for India, for all its villages, was built through this partnership. Today, this network essentially connects every village, and then the villagers can go and get all the government services. They can identify themselves, which is very important, through their fingerprint and so on, and then get the benefits of subsidies or money transfers, or if they're in this universal employment scheme, their payments and so on. All citizens, normal citizens can get passports by identifying themselves through Aadhaar, can get mobile phone connections, and all of that is also based on this network. That's what.
But, Dr. Kumar, with your experience of India, and I know your experience of India, rather, all 3 players sitting here have had a dominant role, in rolling out digital broadband and digital connectivity across the country to the last mile. That's a brilliant example. I mean, for those of you who may not know, I have on Airtel and Vodafone in India, literally, truly unlimited bandwidth, 4G, and unlimited voice calling for under $10 a month. This is something that India can partner with Africa on. I mean, imagine, today you could have unlimited bandwidth, high speed, and 50G. I mean, do you need more than 50 GB? I do everything. I'm a television guy. I can run my television videos on it. I see Netflix on it. I give it to my children. They run their things on it, and it never finishes. And it's high speed. And you have total voice calling within India free, which could be regional in Africa. What is, based on that experience of doing that thing in India, BharatNet, or with Power Grid, or RailNet, 4,800 railway stations in India today have high-speed broadband. Again, Zero money. When you enter a railway station or an airport in India, you don't pay for bandwidth. You get free use. But that allows you to do business. That allows you to continue your education. That allows you to trade. That allows you the facility to do anything you want. Transfer money from your phone to your family or to your college or buy goods, do Amazon, whatever you want. How would that work in Africa? How would an Indian company using Robert's facilitation work with, what is your proposed model of working with the government and the private sector in Africa? Is my question. No, I'm asking Dr. Kumar from a private company perspective. Okay. What would you want?
Okay, so what private companies are good at doing, companies of our size, is in developing the best technology, deploying the network, and maybe even managing and running it. What we cannot do very well is sort of the physical infrastructure. So if the government, if there can be a partnership, maybe with a company like TCIL, to build the fiber infrastructure. So the infrastructure really consists of fiber and towers for radio. Okay. So if that infrastructure can be built through the public component of a public-private partnership, and the private sector can bring in the technology, which also is rapidly changing, needs to evolve from, if it's optical, from GPON to XGS-PON, from 4G to 5G, and that's what the private sector can do very well. So I think a partnership between public sector companies in India, private sector companies like us, public sector companies like TCIL, government of India, and the equivalent, the partners on the African side, I think we can replicate what we have done in India for a national infrastructure for all the government services. We can replicate that in Africa.
I have a very smart panel. He led me to my next panelist. Ms. Ashish, TCIL has already been working in Africa. You gave us that example of Pan-Africa Connect, eConnect. Tell me what has been your experience in working in Africa, and how can we escalate that engagement into what is really needed as priority for countries right now? I mean, if I were to request the Honorable PS or the Minister to say, they've already said it. The Honorable Minister from Malawi will tell you the same thing, that look, we need this. But your experience, how can we escalate and engage that engagement faster, further? What is something that you would want the audience to take away in terms of your experience already working in Africa? And at a summit like this, what would be your concluding remarks as to what do we do next?
Thanks, Manish. I think that's a very good starting point. I think I will go back to the point, the basic title of this session, which is leveraging technology for shared prosperity. And I think there are several experiences that India has had, as Mr. Kumar, years of work with Africa has found that there is no such thing as one size fits all within Africa as well. And that customization of the solutions that you bring to Africa really need to be African and not, not layered on from another country. And to understand that is really very important. And for that, I will go back to the title of this session, which is leveraging technology for shared prosperity. And I'm talking about the bottom 40 in every country. So the bottom 40 actually lives in a different way. The opportunities that are available to them are vastly different from the top 60% of the population. And the important thing is that technology, digitalization is an equalizer. But until we can get the bottom 40, it will be difficult for Africa to even think about $1 trillion, transforming itself into $1 trillion economy. So the focus on the bottom 40 is really very important. TCIL has done certain things in India, and one of the villages across the country, we have 250,000 gram panchayats or block offices, and we have a much smaller number of post offices, which are really life-affirming institutions for that community. And each community in India is an indigenous, proud community, and they hold on to their identity. And one of the things that worries me as we move in this exponential race for digitalization, for technology, is the loss of unique identity that defines us as Indians, as Rwandese, as Senegalese, or whatever country. The process of safeguarding our unique identity within the communities that we live is also very important. So to come back to this, we have 1,55,000 post offices across India, and these are life-affirming institutions within the rural areas. What it means is that people transact businesses through the post office. Most of the post offices are where people send money to their homes. Families go there, have a discussion, a chat, some discussions around rural transformation happens there. So TCIL, in partnership with the Government of India, actually digitized and transformed these rural post offices. The transformation of these rural post offices, the digitalization of these rural post offices actually helped Government of India to then launch the Rural India Postal Bank Services, which is the largest rural postal bank services in the country. So one thing led to the other, and this is where we talk about the exponential growth of technology. So one thing can actually help you to leverage an enormous amount of benefit for the people there. Similarly, in Africa, what we've done is we started in 2006. From 2006 to 2008, we ran a pilot program. And on the basis of that, we started working in another 48 countries of Africa. And that first phase was over in 2017, where we were able to connect some of our private universities, some of our public sector universities, and super specialty hospitals with hospitals and universities here in African countries. And the doctors were able to talk to each other. There was a session for continuing medical education. And then, of course, more than 4,000 to 5,000 students actually enrolled. We used a satellite-based model. For the current model, where we are working again in about 54 countries, and the pilot has just been started. We are working in 6 countries, and Rwanda is one of the countries where we are piloting the program. We are going to use cloud-based services. That's much cheaper and that's also safer. And the ability to provide almost 2,000 courses, short-term courses, long-term courses, degree courses, with a certification that is available to African students. African students can go online and register for the program, and they do not have to pay anything. The Government of India actually underwrites the cost for the private and the government universities for these African candidates. So they can actually go there, they can choose the course that they want to sign up for, and TCIL will make sure that that course is available. So it's a completely free of cost program for all African students. So similarly, there are other programs that we've worked on, but depending on time, I can.
Well, thank you, Ashish. Let me ask Mr. Nagabhushanam. CDOT started long time ago as a laboratory, R&D, right, by Government of India. And you've created technology which has then also been transferred to the private sector, right? From CDOT to Indian private sector, that enabled the Indian private sector to get into manufacturing. And today that's created a beautiful model because it's the Government of India that invested in the R&D, because at that time the private sector was not big enough, large enough, the needs were not large of India, and it moved. And I know the story. I go back to the first telephone exchanges, the first phones, literally. And so it's been a great transition, a great learning experience for you, for India. What is it that you are doing in India now that makes sense for our audience to understand? And 2, what is your proposition as CDOT? I know you explained to the Prime Minister and the ministers yesterday, but what is your proposition to work with Rwanda and Africa's different countries' governments? How can you play a role with institutional connect, G2G? And where can you enable the private sector in countries of Africa to also possibly transfer your technologies like you've done in India? And 2, also a little bit on the human capital creation.
Thank you, sir. Actually, CDOT is a unique research and development organization. Actually, works on emerging technologies. Actually, we will develop standard-based technologies. If you see that whatever that BharatNet program, 250,000 whatever village panchayats we have deployed broadband connections, the technology is from CDOT. And CDOT business model is actually the success, Indian success to deploy, like roll out all these broadband connections across India is actually the business model of the CDOT. CDOT actually transfer of technology model is like CDOT develop the technology and it will give it to a licensees for manufacturing partners. If you see our manufacturing partners, actually we have more than 25 manufacturing partners. Out of 25, 80% manufacturing partners are private only. Because the private players play a major role in bringing down the cost and all actually, cost-wise and all. So 80% is the private players are playing, and this public-private partnership model highly successful because of this transfer of technology model. So this the same thing we can try out actually for doing why we need actually private players in rolling out a countrywide telecom networks or communication networks. Cost is a major factor. So if Rwanda government identifies implementation, installation, deployment agencies locally, CDOT can give the technology and then the same model can work out here also.
Have you done that recently? I believe you've signed an MOU to do something between India.
We are trying, sir. Actually, we are.
No, but I believe there was something signed between India and Nigeria.
Kenya and Nigeria, we have signed.
At the previous TPC summit, just like this one.
Yes, sir.
But this is a great example, of how India as a government institution, also offers the connect to government institutions as well as the private sector to get into manufacturing in Africa, make in Africa. So this is something.
And one more, our biggest advantage with CDOT, being a development technology company, we can customize for your requirements. For African conditions, we can develop the technology and give it to you.
Thank you. Coming back to you, Robert, I feel, governments can have a different take on it, you as Africa can, but I have seen and lived the story of growth for the last 35 years. I moved to America in 1987, and the then Vice President Al Gore, at that some point of time says he gave birth to the internet. Well, I know the real story, how the internet came about. But, we went from heavy-duty cell phones, just Earthlink internet in America, to today probably one of the shining examples of how technology can really play a role. And we've seen the transition in India. Now we are seeing the fast-changing dynamics of Africa. But the bottom line is we are talking public-private partnerships, looking at the sky, painting a picture. Unless there is infrastructure development and infrastructure creation for this very important aspect of GDP growth, which is ICT and IT, in every country, consolidated as a whole by either Smart Africa or the African Union, so that you have that cross-border integrations. But unless there is infrastructure creation, nothing happens. And who is going to create that infrastructure? Is the private sector of Africa enabled enough? Have the financing to create that infrastructure? Will that role lie only and primarily with the governments of each country? In India, it had to be the government. We're talking about even in the last 15, 20 years, correct me, Dr. Kumar. But unless the government of India spent thousands of crores of rupees, which is billions of dollars, in funding the fiber connectivity, the Wi-Fi, the towers, there would be no infrastructure, so there would be no equipment, there would be no services, there would be no economy. So that's the question.
Thank you for that. I don't know if I agree with you entirely that what Africa is constrained with today,
Not constrained.
or what it doesn't have, is infrastructure. There potentially could be actually enough infrastructure, but government may not have set regulations or policies or frameworks that enable shared infrastructure within the investors themselves.
Let me rephrase
So-
my
so-
question.
so then
Robert, Before you move on, because we're not going to mislead either the audience or you. When I said infrastructure exists, but it needs to be enhanced. In that journey from where it exists now to where it needs to go to the last mile, how are we going to take the next steps? Who will play the role? India, we are talking about India and Africa here, so let's keep it within the context. How do we have the Indian government, the African governments, and the private sectors on both sides working together to take the next steps? This is what I want to know from you.
I think the answer to that would be the public-private partnerships,
Okay.
and I'll say that deriving my experience from participation within regional integration initiatives, especially in the technology area. The cost of infrastructure is expensive. It's very true. But also the dynamism of the industry in itself is also, it also comes in question. I will give you an example, a personal experience example. I was born and grew up in Uganda. In 1990, the government of Uganda acquired a huge loan from an international loaning organization. They contracted a company called Marubeni in Japan to come and do the last mile connectivity of the home phone, because we hadn't had the mobile phone. Huge amount of money. And what they wanted is that they wanted every node in Kampala City to have a landline, so you can be able to make a call. Yeah. That project was supposed to take 6 years. So from 1990 to 1996, they dug trenches in the entire city. The entire city was mad. I was there, so I saw it. So they laid cables in every house. They brought a landline to every home. Then they were supposed to first do the backbone, and then to take several other years to make sure they do the last mile connectivity. The last mile connectivity was supposed to end in 1998, so supposed to be 2 years. On the day of the launch of that project, that they had a landline on every home, 1 week later they announced the evolution of the mobile phone. It rendered an investment of more than 10 years absolutely obsolete. All that money, they had to do something to those cables, because now someone could be able to get a mobile phone and move from one point to another. So when we talk about public-private partnership in trying to build the infrastructure, we need to keep at the back of our heads what's the speed of the dynamism of this industry in potentially laying certain investments obsolete. And when you bring these discussions to the table, there has to be people that need to look at that speed of potential obsolescence, of too much investment. I will give you another example, probably. The example of Nokia phone, of the Nokia technology. I believe that everyone in this hall knows that for 9 years in a row, Nokia was the leader of a specific phone manufacturer. Samsung went to talk to them. We know this in the news. They said, well, we think we can change, revolutionize this, so be part of us. They said, no, we've been leaders of this industry. We know how to play this game. We don't need you. Once the smartphone came into place, it took them less than a year to disappear into oblivion. They have never come back again. So in my view, what I think is the world is not short of money to be able to make good investments that India and Africa we can have a win-win situation. Right. We can actually have a win-win. We can build the infrastructure, partnering with governments. There is a lot of money in this world. In 1999, the vice president of Compaq at the time came to Rwanda here. He had a presentation at the hotel. And he told us, he said, the world is not short of money. So if you are to get all the money in this world, put it together and put it in one currency. Every citizen of the world, child who was born 2 hours ago and an old man who is dying tomorrow of old age, would each one of them have $10 million. So the world was not actually short of money. And since 1990, the world has made even much more money. We have more billionaires than we had so many years ago. So all we need, and in response to your how do we make sure that we build the infrastructure we need to make sure, or to partner in putting the infrastructure in place, to make sure that we take the technology to the last person, and make it cheap for him to use. Public-private partnerships, but also have an oversight on reverse innovations. There is a lot that India is capable to do, but when an Indian investor is going to invest, he looks at what an Indian can consume. But there is a lot that Indians can invest into Africa for Africans, not necessarily for Indians. That we're creating reverse innovation. And we also have a huge wealth of young potential in Africa. We have a youthful, so the level of ingenuity of the African youth is so high that we could have so much reverse innovation for a huge market like India. Mobile money, for example, here now India has mobile money, do you? Yeah. But mobile money was born here. M-Pesa, yeah. He was born in Africa. That was a reverse innovation. We did something for a different market. We probably could be using servers made from India to run mobile money, but which you're using in India. So I think we could also look at reverse innovation as one of the huge potential that by laying such infrastructure, you target the wealth of the ingenuity of our young population in trying to put in place products and services that could be suitable for markets, not just confined to Africa, but beyond offshore products.
Robert, one of the important points in this discussion of partnerships, and I think we are focusing a little bit too much on the business or technology side, is we've got to create the right human capital. And that's another partnership that we must engage in, because as you rightly pointed out, that look, India's big thing has been innovation and beyond technology itself. So we've done technology, but we've done innovation too. And there will be, I completely agree with you, if you are an example that I could use in terms of what you just said, I mean, huge. People like you exist in Africa. I mean, we don't have to worry about innovation. We don't have to worry about smartness and intelligence. I see it. I've been traveling Africa for 20 years. I would sit and endorse any day, every day, that we have it all in Africa. We just have to enable it. We just have to leverage it. But that brings me back to you, Dr. Kumar, based on what Robert just said. The role of, see, technology, he's rightly said, technology, let's say today we invest billions of dollars in creating a fiber route. Now I know fiber will live for 10 years and you will find other things to do with fiber and you'll get value added services that you can generate on fiber. So fiber is not a bad investment, but fiber is not everywhere and everything. So you talk about Wi-Fi, then you talk about LTE, but what sits and rides on all this infrastructure, and I completely agree with and take off from what Robert said. We've got to come up with smart technology, smart solutions for smart countries today and smarter populations. And it has to be customized. Again, picking up from what Ashish was saying earlier, there is no pick up from here, replicate and duplicate. There, as much as BharatNet must be a great story of India, you know. So what would you recommend? Now I'm moving on to you with that technology and innovation window. Focus on two things. What is it in technology that we can leapfrog here? India leapfrogged, you know. And two, innovation. And how do you do this reverse innovation from here? Are you going to focus? Companies coming from India must take cue from what Robert just said. You must reverse innovate from here, not just for India, for the whole world.
Thank you. So let me address that actually in the context of what I said before. So in the first phase, of Digital India was digital government. And the next phase is the digital citizen. So everybody needs broadband, so every home, every user, and so on. And fiber, so to go back to Robert's example, fiber, by the way, is not in any danger of getting obsolescent like copper was in 1997. So you can take it from me, you can go lay fiber without any worries. There's no technology in any laboratory that is there now trying to displace fiber. So, but it will take 100 years to get every building wired with fiber. That's one issue. Secondly, we all like to access things wirelessly. So I think wireless access is here to stay, fiber infrastructure and wireless access. And when we looked at this problem in India, we said, how do we get broadband to every citizen? We said it has to be wireless. The BharatNet ends at the village office, government office. From there on, it has to be wireless to the home, to the user who is moving, whatever. And then we said 5G is on the anvil and it should solve the problem for the next generation of wireless technology. Surprisingly, it didn't. So that's when we took the cue on doing something homegrown, and we proposed to the ITU that 5G should mandatorily have a low mobility, large cell operating mode, which means that it should support cells with 6-kilometer inter-cell distance, but with low speeds as the trade-off. Before then, 5G was only supporting 1 kilometer of cells, which is only good for urban areas. ITU saw light and said, yes, 5G has to solve the rural broadband. And the reason we were keen to have it standardized was if it is not standardized, you would not have, low-cost devices that you could use at the home, because if you customize the technology. So ITU accepted it, and now, as the next phase of that homegrown technology, we've actually developed the radio interface technology in India with government funding. The government funded 235 crores. What is that? Some $35 million into the top R&D institutions to develop technology that was capable of doing 5G for this rural application. And now we are trying to get this through as a new radio interface technology in the Global Standards Forum. So India, through TSDSI, is an organizational partner of 3GPP. So 3GPP develops the standards, ITU adopts the standards. We're actually proposed a new radio interface technology that will serve the rural broadband needs. And here I have an appeal to the African countries here. 3GPP has given India the mantle of representing all developing countries for their 5G requirements. And so we request your support in both ITU, where all countries have a vote, to get the right technologies adopted. So to answer Monish's question and on Robert's discussion on homegrown technologies, we have taken a real need in India to connect, to provide digital broadband in rural areas with technology that we've developed in India, and we're now trying to standardize it worldwide so that it can be applied in all developing countries.
Ashish, coming to you, I touched upon this issue that, everybody wants today a knowledge-based economy. And a knowledge-based economy has to be a digital economy. And you've already taken steps in that direction as TCIL in Africa, in India. What do you see as the next steps? Not just the projects that you're rolling out and not just what you might have, sort of in the works with Smart Africa, but how do you see the steps and India's role or India's partnership with Africa in creating a knowledge digital economy in Africa?
Thank you.
But please enumerate the steps. What would you like to see?
Right. I think there are 2 or 3 different dimensions to this, and I will go back to the point that the empowerment of the bottom of the pyramid is really very important, because that's a much larger section of the society, and monetizing your services, your products, and helping you to make sure that that investment pays is when the bottom of the pyramid actually starts to pay for those services. Now, the second point is, how do you move the bottom of the pyramid to start accepting those services? How do those services become relevant for the bottom of the pyramid? And that is the whole empowerment game. How do you rural, underdeveloped, underserved communities to get onto the grid, to get onto the digital grid in each and every country. And I think some of the points that Robert made were actually very useful, quite an eye-opener. Just like the European Union, the African Union, and the interoperability between various services, that actually becomes very powerful. The Pan-Africa Network project that TCIL is doing, I think it's important, but we could actually leverage that from some of the points that Robert really made. So I think one of the important elements to this whole discussion is looking at Africa as a combined union, and trying to get services to be meaningful for the people that the services are created. That's very important. For us in India, I think we've done great as far as using technology is concerned, but there are certain pockets in India. For example, the eight northeastern states, which are, which have a very large international border with China, with Myanmar, and there are areas of political unrest over there, and this has been continuing for the last 45 years. And last year, I wrote a proposal for the Ministry of Northeast, the Ministry of Development for Northeast, and I said capacity building for the government officers who actually run the show over there is very important. And creating the infrastructure in terms of hardware is one thing, but it is also, if not more important, to create the infrastructure for humanware. So the capacity building of the government officers, I raised 40 crores for that, and we launched one of the largest training programs of 50,000 state government employees across each state. So in a combined version of the northeastern states, we did that. The Ministry of Electronics and Telecom, Information Technology did that. And it has been a very successful project. So I think the need to continuously invest in education, in capacity building, in technology integrated education is really paramount. And it has to be a demand-driven service. So we can continue to build infrastructure, but unless and until the demand really comes from bottom up, we're never going to be able to make money. The infrastructure, the services are never going to be viable financially. So in order to do that, the biggest investment has to come in capacity building of the people, the empowerment of the people. That remains key to every success.
Thank you. This question now, my next question goes out to both TCIL and to Tejas. You see, we've heard from Ashish that capacity building is critical. Both of you, one is government, the other one's private sector, both driven hardcore by R&D. You have how many? 300 plus engineers in Tejas, and CDOT also prides in doing R&D, 1,000 engineers. What would you offer as a platform, as a proposal to Africa, working with each individual African country as well as with Smart Africa, let's say, that would enable and accelerate this particular aspect of human capacity building, particularly in your sector, because we understand this is the sector that will create the ultimate, GDP impinge. So what would you offer? Let's start with you as a government sector. As CDOT, and then we'll go to Dr.
Yeah, actually, the thing is, CDOT always develop technology based on the need, actually. As far as India's need is concerned, there is already backhaul is available with the GPON, whatever that BharatNet program. There is a high bandwidth pipe is there. That it is going to the block level or gram panchayat level. Further villages, we are using Wi-Fi technologies. We actually, CDOT got a very unique Wi-Fi products. The Wi-Fi products works even 20 kilometers line of sight and all. Even you can make a Wi-Fi links, 20 kilometers distance links also we can make, point-to-point links, some 3-4 kilometers. So we have a product portfolios of different things actually.
No, but what I'm asking you is that how would you set up a partnership? How would CDOT work, let's say, with another institution, whether it's public or private in Africa, to create the human capital, for equipment to be actually learned, and not just learning to use your equipment, but probably taking the education or the learning curve to the point where they start designing their own. You know, it needs to be designed and manufactured in Africa.
Yes, yes.
Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, so in India, you know, we have, I'm proud to say, trained much of the telecom workforce in the country, especially on optical networking, you know, through the years. Today, we span the whole spectrum of telecom technologies, from optical transmission to, you know, to broadband access through GPON and wireless. So, and we are training essentially our customer engineers and our own engineers. We also set up partnerships with some universities in India who are trying to, you know, train their, to sort of a finishing school. This is more like technical schools, so that they could provide workforce to the operators. We'd be happy to do something similar in Africa. We could train engineers on the whole gamut of telecom technologies. So then you would have engineers who could run your networks, who could design and run your networks, not necessarily build equipment, that's the next step. But we could, as a first step, offer training programs. This would be like 2-week-long programs, which would help you design networks and operate them. And we've done this with many of the telecom network operating personnel in India, thousands and thousands, and we'd be happy
I thought
to
you
do
were
that in
doing
Africa.
that already in Africa too. You do employ a lot of
We
local
employ,
engineers.
we prefer to employ local people in all the countries where we operate, because that's how we have a sustainable model of working in that country. It's not
I would
about
recommend some sort of a relationship between CDOT and Tejas also in putting out, public-private partnership. From there comes to a public-private partnership in Africa and countries. Let's round off the discussion with you, Robert.
Sir, I am
Yeah,
disturbing
please.
you already. Tejas is our manufacturing partner.
See, that's it. So people should know, how collaboration between a government R&D institution goes to a private R&D and manufacturing institution, and that's been the story of India. But Robert, coming back to you now, everybody has spoken. You started the conversation, not me. You started the conversation on public-private partnerships. What's the road, the pathway that we need to take? So round off this discussion before we open it to the audience here as to what could be the path going from this conference now. And, let's be futuristic.
Thank you for that. But before I can give a submission on what I'm saying, let me just talk about, or just give a brief comment
Sure.
on what he just talked about and what he talked about. On the question of saying what kind of collaboration can there be to make sure that the human capital, specifically human capital, is developed enough to be able to absorb our thought process that we are talking about now. And my thinking would be putting in place joint research. Yes. The joint research initiative, part of what Rwanda is trying to do today, when you look at the Kigali Innovation City, it's built on a philosophy that there will be the private sector, there would be the academia, and there will be the fund. That cycle, the infusion of the potential of the three forces, brings in the kind of human capital that you will use that transcends the regional thinking or the country thinking or the specific way of looking at things, and it broadens the knowledge and the mind that we critically need to be able to innovate and mitigate a lot of issues that are on our way to become a digital, an information society, a digital-driven society. I wanted to talk about that we need to make sure that we support the joint innovation and bring into different thinking into one thought process that gives us what we require to build very good human capital. Now, on ending this is, look, India is a huge economy. Africa is probably equally huge, but there is a lot that we can benefit from each other. Like I started saying from the beginning, things I'm very, very much involved in, trying to create structures and systems that can make capital flow, investment capital flow into Africa. My thinking is let's try to collaborate, to work together in making sure that we make the cost of investment cheaper, but we also make sure that we work in such a way that we protect our intellectual property rights. I'll give you an example. I've been very much involved in the private sector advocacy initiatives in Rwanda specifically and the region. Someone calls you from United Arab Emirates and says, I'm coming with a group of 7 investors. They pick a plane, they ask you, so you mobilize your youth. You have so many startups. And all of them are brilliant ideas, smart ideas. You bring them in the hall, you call them, you say, I need you to meet at Telecom House on 6th floor. Investors are coming. So you even organize a car. It goes and picks them from the airport. These are good investors. They have not told you how much money they want to invest. They have not told you what field they're investing in. They have told you nothing. All they told you, they're investors. They come, you line up a team of your best young ideas and business models. These people come, they listen to each one of them. They take notes. They fly back. They write an email, maybe follow-up emails, maybe 2, 3 in the first 30 days, and you won't hear about them again. Then you go to attend an ITU meeting in Busan, in South Korea, or you go to Barcelona for the GSM summit, or you go to LA for the Industrial Revolution Summit. When you get there, you find some of these business models are being pitched in those big conferences, and they are attracting a lot of investments. Some of them are landing on New York Stock Exchange, and they are acquiring billions of money. And when you look at it, you say, but this model looks like the same model like a young kid, a young boy who we saw who we had at Kelab in Rwanda. It's exactly the same model. It's actually their model. But you never had intellectual property right protection. You never had. These people are pitching. They have been waiting for investment. The investor is bringing money. But he actually took it to the market and he's doing okay. I don't think we should see this from India. No. I think we should see very good, respectable investors of integrity, people who will know I'm going to use this information. I need genuine partnerships, not partnerships based on espionage and stealing information and going and selling it and benefiting alone and becoming a big economy and people become. Just to wrap up that, I would think that this is what I would want to see from initiatives like these, conferences like these ones, true, genuine partnerships with young innovators in Africa who have ideas which you can infuse with your finances, and we really build viable partnerships that are based on integrity, not on theft.
Well,
thank you.
No, thank you. And thanks for sort of rounding it up in a very nice way. But let me make it very clear that that's the purpose and intent of being here. The whole idea of showcasing what India has from an expo standpoint and talking about the potential partnerships, collaborations, means and methodologies of working together on the conference side, bringing in the innovators locally, and we hope that the next time we'll bring more of the African sort of innovators, champions who want to get into the technology sector together. But even the young ones right now are having a good discussion. My point is that at the end of the day, everything is a business. For the government, it is a business to move the country's economy. For the companies, it's a business to create, and leverage what they have done in R&D and manufacturing to the next level. Technology doesn't stop, So we've got to create partnerships that are sustainable, that are scalable, and we hope to draw enough lessons from this exchange here in the last 2 days. And one thing we can assure you that, India and Africa have similar challenges, similar histories, similar backgrounds. So I think one important point that you mentioned, and I would like to emphasize again, is that also. And the third thing is how ingenious we can get to drive these partnerships now based on whatever business models that we can create. Well, thank you all very much. We need to close this hopefully shortly. Are we good with time? Can we take a few questions or are we done? Sorry? Is she in the room? Okay, so she can come in? Okay. So very quickly, I mean, you've heard a lot, we've talked about a lot. If you have something very specific from the audience in terms of what you would like to see, know, happen in terms of India-Africa partnership, I would welcome that. Maybe a couple of questions. If you don't have any, we'll be all right because we've talked a lot. Any questions? Oh my God, good young hands. All right. Quick ones, please. No comments, just questions, what you would want to know from the eminent panelists here.
Yes, hello. Hello, I'm Daniel Karui from Osaka.
Speak louder. Just
Hello?
speak up.
Hello, are you getting me?
Can you raise the volume on his mic, please? Go ahead.
Hello? Yes. I'm Daniel Karui from Osaka. My question goes to Richard. In the introductory remarks that you had made, you said you work with Afronek and you deal with IP version 4 and IP version 6. I wanted to know if there's any partnership you have with the public sector. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hello? Thank you. I don't work with Afrinic on a day-to-day basis as an employee. I'm the vice chair of the board of Afrinic. So I influence decisions which are made to make sure that the acquisition of IP4 and IPv6, and specifically migration now from IPv4 to IPv6, because as you may know, IPv4 is almost running out. So we are constantly trying to make sure that we migrate the version to the latest version. But yes, there is a program called the Fire program with Afrinic, where Afrinic gives out a portion of a fund that goes to young their website. It's afrinic.net, and look for the Fire program. It's an initiative where we give out grants to entrepreneurs who are in that space. You could find an opportunity to, if you have a program, you could find an opportunity for its funding through the Afrinic Fire Program initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, in the back.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Samuel from Nigeria. I would like to ask, I've paid attention to all the discussions since yesterday. How can Nigeria be a part of the Smart Alliance and have this kind of Indian technology in Nigeria? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marian Ntingwi from Malawi. Mine is more like a comment as well as a play. Looking at or hearing from other comments, which I think Richard was giving us on exploiting the youth, the innovative youth, when it comes to partnership. That is the situation which is there. I believe each and every person was gifted to invest in his or her country when you are innovative. And my plea is, if we are having India, Africa, we need to have good policies as well as guidelines to protect our youth. Because we want Africa to grow. We don't want Africa to continue giving our potential and we remain where we are. No. So my plea is, let's have good policies before we
you know, as a world, as communities, and between the two continents, India is a subcontinent, Africa is a continent in itself, that's almost 2.5 billion people. That make a huge difference in the whole world. So there is no, you should not feel that why India does not want to come to Rwanda or does not. I don't think there is that issue at all. India wants to come to Rwanda. That's why we are here. India wants to come to DRC. India wants to come to Nigeria, and India wants to come to Malawi and Zimbabwe and every country. So thank you very much. We'll take rest of the questions after this session. I thank my panelists very, very much. And please, a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.
Another round of applause for our panelists, please, and our moderator, Mr. Monish Gupta. Thank you very much for sharing with us your experiences, your wisdom, and your insights. Just before we move into the closing ceremony, I would kindly request for the people in the exhibition room to please kindly come in and take your seats. Ushers, if you could please help us get the people in the exhibition room, anyone standing in the hallway, and then we will begin the closing